What's up guys, Braxophone here, and today I'm bringing you an updated Itto guide. We're gonna be looking... Hold on one second. Huh? Wait, what do you mean nothing's changed since its release? Literally nothing? Okay, well, change of plans. Rather than have you sit through a 25-minute overly detailed repeat of the previous guide I made, I'm gonna just make this one as straightforward and quick as I can. Which means in this guide, I'll be going over only the best build options for Itto and none of the KQM stuff. I'm also not going to go into every single intricate detail of his kit, just what he does and how to play him. If you want a more detailed guide, I'll have a link to my last one in the description because that one does talk a lot more in depth about what he does. Lastly, I'll give you guys a quick review of Itto and whether or not he's still worth pulling for on his rerun banner in the patch 2.7. With that being said, my name is Braxophone and let's talk about Itto. In the absolute simplest terms, Itto is a strong GEO damage dealer. He has a special charge attack that's going to be his main source of damage. You can have up to 5 stacks of the special charge attack at a time, and you get those stacks by doing his normal attack combo as well as using other parts of his kit. Specifically, he gets 1 stack on the second hit of his combo and 2 stacks on hit 4. If you look behind him when he has stacks, you'll see an indicator showing how many are stacked up. His elemental burst is what gives him most of his strength since it infuses his basic attack with GEO and gives him buffs. Specifically, it converts a portion of his defense to attack and grants him attack speed. It also makes it so that attacks 1 and 3 can grant stacks for his charge attacks. Every hit you deal can generate a stack. It has a high energy cost, but with the right team setup, it's not too much of an issue. Now, his elemental skill is going to throw out Ushi, who's probably the best dancer in Tevat. Ushi deals a bunch of damage when you toss him out, and he acts as an HP based taunt, which means enemies will focus on him. When you throw him out, and whenever he leaves the field, he gives Itto a charged attack stack. Whenever he takes damage, Itto gets a stack from that as well. There's going to be a short cooldown on it though. Itto can only actually get a stack from Ushi taking damage once every 2 seconds, so you can't just get like infinite stacks off of nothing. Lastly, Ushi will generate between 3 and 4 particles when you throw him out, so he actually is a pretty good source of energy for Itto. Now, as far as passives go for Itto, they just buff his burst and charged attack. His first passive gives him attack speed and stagger resistance, and his second passive gives him more charged attack damage. For talent priority, most people opt to build his burst first, but you should actually raise his basic attack, then burst, then skill, since his basic attack is the multiplier where most of his damage is going to come from. You'll see this a lot in the community talent level up thing that they added in 2.7. Most people are going to level burst first for infusion based characters, but for the most part, your basic attack is going to be what matters more. Now, I normally go over constellations in these guides, but last time I checked, most of you guys can read, so if you want an in-depth look at his constellations, check out my more in-depth Itto guide. The link is going to be in the description to that, and I'll keep referencing it throughout the video. Real quick, let's just talk about his artifacts and weapons. If you're below AR45, don't bother grinding out artifacts for Itto just yet. As I always say in these guides, you're not guaranteed a 5-star artifact from domains until you get to the highest level one, which isn't going to be accessible to you until you're AR45. In the meantime, you can just kind of use whatever you have, and sets aren't as important as stats. 2 4-star sets that can work on Itto are going to be the Martial Artist set and the Berserker set. Martial Artist will give you a bunch of normal and charged attack damage, and the Berserker set will give you crit damage. You can use the 2 or 4-piece sets of these, or you can opt for 2 pieces of Defender's Will, which will give you a 30% defense bonus, which again is just super helpful for Itto because he likes defense. For stats, because you're not farming out anything specific, it's fine if you just want to use Defense Sands, Geo Damage, or Defense Goblet, and a Defense Circlet. Don't try to force yourself to build crit if you don't have the weapons and stats to do so. That just honestly gets a lot easier once you get to AR45. But when you do get to AR45 and above, you're gonna be in artifact heck. Itto sort of needs a 4-piece husk. It gives a huge defense and geo damage buff, and it's easily his best set because it was seemingly made for him. The biggest problem with the husk set is that every character that wants husk wants all 4 pieces of husk, and if you don't have all 4 pieces, you're gonna be missing out on a pretty big portion of your damage. So that's why it can be a pain to farm for, but once you have the 4 pieces, it's totally worth it. For stats, you want to give him Defense Sands, a Geo Damage Goblet, and a crit rate or crit damage circlet. Those stats are the priority for Itto to increase his damage, since his defense gets converted to attack, and defense will always be a higher stat by default for him. For other artifact sets, you can use Retracing Boltlight for charged and normal attack bonus, or 2 Petra and 2 Husk, but I would still go for 4 Husk for the highest damage, because it's just the best. For substats, prioritize Energy Recharge till around 130%, then focus on crit rate and damage until you have at least 50 crit rate and 100 crit damage. Defense is a really good stat for him, but if you can't crit in the first place, then you'll be missing out on damage. As for weapons, the one that's truly best for you can vary when they're close in power rating. These rankings can be referenced on the Keqing main's website directly based on Merp's weapon calcs. Obviously, Redhorn, as expected, is going to be the best for its defense-based damage bonus and its high crit damage main stat. But behind that isn't really a surprise either, because Serpent Spine is always busted on every Claymore DPS in the game. I mean, until it's not. I'm sure there's going to be a Claymore that doesn't want it eventually, but damage bonus is really hard to beat. Scoured Pride is also amazing for its energy recharge that's basically completely going to cover Itto's energy needs, and the Vacuum Blade bonus damage is actually pretty significant because it scales off of attack and Itto gets a bunch of attack from his burst. Now, outside of that, as a free-to-play player without the other options, White Blind is going to be an amazing weapon for Itto, and I'd highly recommend crafting it for him specifically. Here's some other weapons that you can use, though I would definitely recommend White Blind in a worst-case scenario since it's perfect for him stat-wise. Definitely look into White Blind. Rather than go over a bunch of teams for Itto, we're just going to go over some of his best teammates individually, since nothing changed from my last Itto guide. Again, if you want to reference that for weapons or teams, you can check the link in the description, and that guide's going to have a lot more detail. The first thing that you need to know about Itto team building is that you basically need Goro. Do I mean literally? No. You can obviously put Itto into a team slot while Goro is not in another team slot. But Goro is Itto's premier and signature support. He gives a lot of defense buffs by default, and even more damage buffs with constellations. An Itto team without Goro loses out on quite a bit. With Goro, you buff Albedo and Noelle if you choose to run them too, and overall he ends up being super helpful. Outside of Goro, you really want to take advantage of other GEO units. Ningguang can be used for burst damage, Zhongli can be used for shield and resistant shred, and even Geo Traveler can be useful for damage and crit rate. The only character you want to avoid here is Yunjin. She doesn't buff his charged attacks at all, and since that's his main source of damage, Yunjin's burst becomes significantly less helpful. You can also throw in Bennett since Itto gets benefits from attack buffs. You could also run Fischl for a bit of particle generation, but overall I would avoid Raiden just because both Raiden and Itto want to take up field time. Venti also works with Itto because his charge attacks can hit inside of Venti's vortex. Basically, as easy as I can explain it, the TLDR of this section is that Itto needs mostly Geo units to max out his damage, but also because Geo loves Geo, focusing on Geo for the most part will alleviate Itto's energy needs and also provide the best overall synergy. This is basically all of the build information I have for you guys. Again, if you're interested in more detail, check out my in-depth Itto guide from his release since nothing has really changed. For now, let's review Itto. I want to tell you guys why Itto is or is not worth pulling for anymore and what you should be looking for. A lot of people have left comments on my recent videos about being unsure about saving or pulling on Itto's rerun, and I honestly think the skepticism is pretty fair. When he released, everyone was calling him pretty balanced, which isn't a bad thing, but with potentially more powerful characters like Kazuha on the horizon, it can be really hard to say whether or not Itto is actually going to be more worth it for your account than another unit. And that's what this Itto review section is for. The first thing to know about Itto is that while his weapon options have an amazing free-to-play option available, the White Blind, his teams are anything but free-to-play friendly if you want to get the most out of them. His highest damaging teams usually require 2 5-stars, with the second one being Zhongli or Albedo, and in some cases you'll use all 3. Since none are standard 5-star characters, odds are you're missing at least one if you're completely free to play or if you came to the game late. And on top of that, you'll need to invest in Goro for Itto, even though Goro isn't used for any other character in the game except for Noelle and Albedo. If you don't have 1 or 2 of those units, your Itto teams are going to be significantly less strong than the best options. And since he's more or less a balanced character at high investment, taking away his high investment options can actually leave him lagging a little bit behind. But with that being said, free-to-play friendliness aside, there's another major issue that has to deal with the Geo element in general. Geo is kind of stuck right now. The only reaction it has is Crystallize, which doesn't even provide that strong of shields, and it deals 0 damage. Every other element in the game has some powerful niche it fits into, with Melt and Vaporize teams, Taser variants with Swirl and Electrocharge, and even Overload teams, as silly as they can be sometimes. With tons of enemies having elemental or straight up Geo resistance, and Anemo not being able to swirl Geo to reduce that resistance, Geo will always be at a disadvantage. Until there's units like Zhongli that are free to play accessible, or until Geo Resin resonance can compensate for not having a strong reaction, there will always be stronger units that can freeze, vaporize, melt, and swirl. And an even bigger issue is that if Hoyoverse did implement strong Geo buffing characters into the game rather than just buffing Geo in general, it would buff every single Geo character, leaving some current and future Geos to be potentially broken. Because the entire gimmick behind Geo, or at least what Hoyo is insinuating for Geo, is that they want that to be the defense class. But imagine if you just made a stronger Goro to compensate for not having reactions. Then you're literally just buffing an entire archetype of characters while further restricting Geo to only have certain character setups to get the most damage out of it and compete with reaction-based teams. Where other DPS of other elements can find ways to increase their damage as the game power creeps years into the future, which, let's be honest, it probably will at some point, Geo will lag behind unless the element gets better reactions, better resonance, or a really broken support. So while Itto is a strong character and could be good for your account, it's hard to say whether or not he'll withstand the test of time. I'm not necessarily trying to dissuade you from pulling, but just be aware that if you're looking for a character that you can use long into the future, like Ganyu, Ayaka, Hu Tao, or Raiden, Itto probably is not going to be that. But for the time being, he's a solid unit and good in most content. If you're not all that worried about the future stuff and you have some of the Geo units that he needs to be his best, I would say he is actually a solid pull for your account. But even more importantly than that, play who you want. Thanks for watching, everyone. As usual, it is a huge favor to me if you end up liking the video if you made it this far, and leave a comment about whether or not you pulled for Itto or how you use him nowadays. The algorithm craves interactions. If you enjoy my content, feel free to subscribe, and check out my Twitch at twitch.tv/Braxophone, where we go live with basically all the Hoyoverse games and more. Catch you next time, everyone. Peace!